let's begin talking about Brexit then. So, as I understand, you've been a Brexit supporter for the entire time that the topic had come about. You joined the Brexit Party, and you were a prominent voice among the right-wing commentariat about Brexit, and you don't seem to have ever backed down from that position. So, would you like to give me a quick summary as to why you're a Brexiteer?
So, I was actually, being frank, I was a mild Eurosceptic. I'm a businessman by background, and I was a mild Eurosceptic. I knew that I didn't want to be part of the European Union, but I was running my business and getting on with life. And I didn't campaign for Brexit in 2016. I did donate to Vote Leave, which was the anointed campaign group by the government. But the thing that got my attention was Mark Carney saying things like, if we vote to leave the European Union, we will need to put £250 billion aside in case there's a run on the banks. And George Osborne saying things like 1 million people would lose their jobs, 75,000 jobs would be lost in the city, we'd go into an immediate deep recession, and he would have to apply austerity, which is actually what you never do if you go into a recession. Right. You actually let the state come to the rescue of the economy. And that got my antenna up, and I kept thinking, well, these guys aren't telling the truth. They're actually outright lying. And Mark Carney, who's meant to just be the governor of the Bank of England, shouldn't have a view on Brexit. He should just react to what the political circumstances are thrown at him. He should not be, offering up his opinion. And so I got the impression then that the establishment was moving against a perfectly legitimate question, which was, do you want the United Kingdom to be a member of the European Union? And I wrote, as one does, I don't know what your political journey's been like, but mine started with writing furious letters to the Financial Times. Can you believe it? To the Financial Times.
I can't believe it. Mine was basically writing furious letters and putting them on YouTube.
Yeah.
I was nobody, I didn't have anywhere to go.
But I didn't even appreciate then that the FT wasn't, on my side of the debate. I just kind of thought everyone was a sort of honest broker. Anyway, I started off by writing these letters, Telegraph as well, obviously. And then Theresa May got appointed by the Conservative Party's Prime Minister. She said all the right things. No deal's a deal. A bad deal. No deal's better than a bad deal. Nothing's agreed till everything's agreed. It's just about managing and so on. I thought, right, fine, she's got it. And I vacated again. And then,
excuse me.
And then, of course, she didn't deliver Brexit, and I got increasingly anxious about what was going on, but at that stage I was a Tory donor, and I went to a lunch with Michael Gove. This is too much detail.
No, you please. I won't hear it all.
So I went to a lunch with Michael Gove. I've been
a bit ill this week, so I apologise.
But if you're a Tory donor, and I was a member of something called the Renaissance Group, right. You pay an amount of money per annum, and you get to have lunch with a cabinet minister once a month, with no more than 10 people present. And my first meeting was with Michael Gove, who, for me, was a Brexit hero because he campaigned for us to leave the European Union.
Yeah.
And as a businessman, I asked him, well, if we don't get a good deal with the EU, this was in June 2018, if we don't get a good deal with the EU, what are your no-deal plans? Are you going to deregulate, cut taxes, rocket propel the British economy so that we can take any, hits we might get from the EU? And he said, no, we don't need any plan B. I said, what do you mean you don't need a plan B? He said, we're going to get a good deal. And at that moment, the balloon...
Oh, are we?
Yeah, the balloon went up for me.
Yeah.
These guys don't know what they're doing. Either they don't know what they're doing or they're going to screw us. And then, of course, it became evident that Theresa May wasn't in good faith. She wasn't going to deliver Brexit. And then I heard about the Brexit Party through someone I worked with. And they said, would you like to meet Nigel? And I thought at the time, ooh, Nigel, right-wing, xenophobic, do I really want to meet him? And of course... but I said, yeah, sure, absolutely.
I don't mean to laugh, but looking back, why can't he be the Nigel Farage I was promised?
But, as a businessman, having, been quite institutional all my life. Anyway, I met Nigel, and of course, Nigel's none of that. Nigel's very affable, very good intellect, he's certainly not a racist, and so on. And we talked about his new party, the Brexit Party, and I said, well, I'll do whatever I can to help. And before I knew it, I was standing in the Euro elections in May 2019, and sadly, I haven't been able to look back since. You know, it's been a sort of full-on political. Yeah. I've been on the same. I say I'm on a political journey. I'm learning more and more about politics as I go forward, and I'm getting less and less impressed by those who govern us. And you know, and which is why I know that we now need. Which is why I'm acutely aware that the country's facing what I call an existential threat, constitutionally, democratically, economically, and culturally, and we need a 180-degree change in the way the country is governed.
There is no doubt in my mind that so many people are converging on that same perspective for a good reason. It has to be that there is something to it. Just a quick aside on the Brexit thing. I'm not a businessman, nor am I an economist, but it strikes me that we have the corporate tax rate that's twice that of Ireland, which is right next to us, which strikes me as a very poor strategic move. Why aren't we undercutting them?
I mean, it's absolutely absurd. And if it is a bad strategic move for the United Kingdom, you can imagine how awful it is for Northern Ireland, which operates an open economy across the island of Ireland with the Republic. And they have a tax rate, or they had for many years, of 20%. And the Republic of Ireland has a tax rate of 12.5%. And all businesses, if offered the opportunity to work in Europe, would always choose a lower tax rate than a higher one. And businesses were sucked out of Northern Ireland. You know, we tend to think of Northern Ireland as a poor province, which it is. It's the biggest deficit province in the United Kingdom. But that's very significantly due to the fact that it has an open economy with the Republic, and the Republic has half the tax rate.
Yes.
And so just to put that into context, last year the Republic had £24 billion in corporate tax revenue. £24 billion. And I think their economy is about a sixth the size of the United Kingdom. And we in the United Kingdom had 60 billion. So when people say to you, we need to raise tax rates to make more revenue for the exchequer, they're talking garbage.
Yes.
If they slash tax rates, they would attract more businesses like the Republic of Ireland has, and they would gain more corporate tax revenue. The exchequer would get richer.
And this is what Liz Truss tried to do, and she got ousted by a kind of internal coup, didn't she?
She did. So, you know, one of the bizarre things in my mind is that economics shouldn't be an ideological. You know, I had a discussion about the word ideological. But economics shouldn't be driven by ideology. Economics, I think, should be driven by a pragmatic recognition of where the country is at any particular point in time, and you adjust your economic policy accordingly. So, for example, if we were at war against, if we're in a world war, for example, I would endorse completely very high tax rates and demands made on private enterprise and individuals, because we're at war. But we're not at war, and we do nevertheless...
Theoretically.
and we do nevertheless have the highest tax burdens as a proportion of GDP since World War II. And we also, as it happens, have the highest debt burden as a percentage of GDP since World War II. And the policies which got us to this position are the policies which need changing if we want to reduce the tax burden and reduce the debt burden. But instead of changing direction, the policies that got us to the position are the ones that the establishment continue to wish to foist on us. And Liz Truss, it may have been a slightly ham-fisted attempt at changing the direction of travel, but she recognised she had to change the way the country was governed economically because we were being overtaxed, the state was spending too much money, and we needed to row back the state, row back spending, and cut taxes. And of course, the political organisms which run the United Kingdom, many of which are not democratically accountable, including notably the Bank of England, again,
Thank you, Mr. Blair.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Blair. To cut Liz Truss off at the knees. They didn't like the change in direction. They didn't want the received political governance wisdom, if you like, to change, and they couldn't tolerate her agenda. She did make some mistakes. She didn't have to offer up a cut in tax rates for the most wealthy people in the country from 45%. I think she was going to cut it to 42.5%. She could have left that alone. The optics of that was bad. But Liz Truss's idea on the economy was basically the right one: cut taxes, reduce spending, and liberate the private sector.
It it really drives me crazy because just from anyone who had the best interest of the United Kingdom in mind, to have essentially a very close competitor, English-speaking first world country, with half our tax rate that has an open economy connected to the United Kingdom.
Yeah.
I mean, like I said, I'm not an economist. I'm not a businessman. I'm not anyone other than a concerned onlooker. But I'm looking at this and thinking, okay, but this is surely strategic suicide. We are allowing our competition to completely undercut us and destroy the temptation for people to invest in the nation.
Yeah, that's precisely what happens. And AstraZeneca, I don't know if you followed a couple of years ago, maybe even
not very closely.
As a year ago, AstraZeneca, instead of developing a new facility in the United Kingdom, decided that they were going to go to Republic of Ireland, and they cited the tax rate.
Yeah.
And of course, they're not wed to any particular country. They'll go to the country which has the least regulations and the lowest tax rate, so they can make the most profit.
It's the same with all of the Silicon Valley tech giants. Every single one of them has their headquarters in Ireland, and so any interface anyone in Britain has with, on a professional level, with any of the major internet services, the social media giants, they're all in Ireland. It's all Ireland. When you get paid by YouTube, it's Google Ireland has paid you however much. And it's for exactly that reason. There's just no reason not to. And what this is doing is making Ireland a very rich and prosperous country, which is great, but that's not us. Why are we...
We should be doing it. And,
Precisely.
I mean, Rishi Sunak, you may have followed, tied us, or was trying to tie us into a minimum 15% corporation tax rate agreed with the OECD countries. Yeah. And why would you do that? Why would a nation state whose one economic tool, fiscal policy, is so critical in the way that you run that nation state, why would it give up a fiscal tool in the pursuit of some kind of harmony with its neighbors? Global trade is not a kumbaya experience. Global trade is a competitive one.
It's meant to be ruthless.
It's meant to be ruthless for the benefit of the British people. And so we should keep all our armory, if you like, economic armory, at our disposal in the pursuit of getting richer as a country. And this is, I mean, you talked about Brexit. Brexit was a cry from the British people, not just to leave the EU. It was a cry from the British people to stop governing the country through global liberal principles, economic, cultural, and constitutional. And it was a cry of the British people to recognise we are the United Kingdom. Can you please start putting British interests first? That's fundamentally what it was. And we want to be governed by people in this country. We want to be able to hold them accountable. We want to be able to boot them out when they get it wrong. And we want those monkeys to do what's best for us.
Honestly, the reason I've got this map of the referendum up is, I mean, I agree with you, but I think it's a very English phenomenon as well. The left behind parts of England, in particular, are the most Brexiteer-y places for a reason. But even then, England and Wales, generally, I think it was kind of almost spiritual. Like, we shouldn't be governed by someone on the continent.
No, we shouldn't. And by the way, we still are.
I know.
And this is the point. Yeah. And it's not just the EU that's governing us, as I'm sure you're better aware than I am. We have multiple global institutions and international treaties, as well as domestic bodies, which neuter our ability to govern ourselves as a democracy. And these are the things that we need to be fighting against tooth and nail. This is where Blair was so evil, because he set this train in motion in many ways. Well, the EU goes back before that. But the hollowing out of our democracy, the pursuit of international treaties, the abrogation of local governance in favor of international institutions, all of that started with Blair in the way that, we're now, the speed at which we're now...
We're kind of enmeshed in this strange sort of spider silk web of quangocracies.
We are, yeah.
I think Liz Truss is the best example of someone's come up to that and said, okay, I'm just going to push through it. And no, you're not. It's very deeply entrenched.
Strangled her.
And it's going to require legislation to remove, clearly.
And so they were never going to let Brexit happen. And that's why I think it's very important to recognise we didn't get Brexit, because Only if we got Brexit, which means genuinely cutting our ties with the European Union from a regulatory perspective, genuinely removing their laws and their ability to influence our laws, only then would we be free to push back against this global liberal order and indeed the quangocracies, because you'd pull the rug out under the feet of all these people. And some people say, oh, Ben, that's so risky. We would have ended up in a trade war with the EU. Well, my response to that is, well, let's have the trade war with the EU. We can win it. Deregulate. Cut taxes. It would have forced our government to do what's right for the United Kingdom. A trade war would have been cathartic for the United Kingdom. We would have got rid of so much baggage that we carry unnecessarily.
It would have been so brilliant if they'd cut corporation tax something ridiculously low. I mean, as someone who owns a business, I would have appreciated it, but it would have been just an unleashing of the country.
Absolutely,
optimism would have returned.
Which is what Trump's about to do in the US.
Exactly.
You know what Trump has said is he's going to ditch net zero, which is highly expensive for energy and for businesses and for families and households and everything else. He's going to deregulate and he's going to cut taxes. Simple. And if the UK,
it's really not very complicated.
It's not complicated. Yeah. And if the UK doesn't follow suit, we're going to be in a real pickle, because capital is fluid, global capital is fluid. It will leave the UK, it will leave the European Union, and it will go to the States because it'll find a much pleasanter experience there.
And we're going to have such a good example in another English-speaking country that we're very close to politically, where they're doing the exact right thing for themselves and we're doing the exact wrong thing for ourselves. And yet we're trapped in this. Again, it just feels like this kind of gossamer webs that just hold, oh no, you can't do that. It's like, but I think if I just tense my muscles, I could. Yeah. And for some reason, they're like, yeah, but you're not allowed to do that. No, we can't do that. Just don't. This narcotic effect that our current political environment has. Like, yeah, but we're just going to raise your taxes now. So it's just more difficult. And everything becomes more difficult. And so everything, it looks like doom and gloom on the horizon just because they're not prepared to release the gentle hold they have on us. Slowly pulling us back into the loam until we just dissolve into nothingness. And it's like, no, I just don't want that. And they don't seem to understand the benefits that encouraging your own population to actually go out and get something done does. I mean, this would be steel sharpening steel. You know, if we become more competitive, we become better. This is a pursuit of excellence. Okay, well, what's that do to the Europeans? Well, that makes them up their game as well.
Absolutely.
And so suddenly
competition is good.
Everyone is getting better. Yeah. And yeah, exactly. Competition is a fundamental good that for some reason the international liberal order is just completely against, which you would think that's weird for liberals. They were usually very pro-competition. But
I remember when Sunak was at a conference, I can't remember if it was a G7 or G20 or something, he tweeted, obviously in a moment of euphoric, collegiate emotion towards his fellow world leaders, he tweeted saying, we must not compete with our friends and neighbours, something to that effect. And I thought to myself, you just haven't got it, buddy.
Yeah.
We can cooperate with them, but we must compete with them.
Yeah. I mean, I'm constantly competing with my friends in a genial way. You know,
absolutely.
You know, once you've got a fair and established set of rules that everyone agrees to, competition becomes fun. Because now everyone knows no one's going to get screwed, you know, and they're going to do their best and someone's going to come out on top, but that's okay. You know, no one loses out really. It's just everyone gets a bit better. But anyway, I don't want to focus too much on that because it's just one of those things that I just find very enervating, and I just want to talk about it. But anyway, so I found the Lord Ashcroft polls just to linger on Brexit a little bit more very fascinating because of the reasons that people gave for voting for Brexit. I don't know if we can get this up actually. Make this a bit big. It's quite small. But why the Leave voters voted to leave is the number one principle was decisions about the UK should be made in the UK, which obvious. Sort of essentially English radicalism. I think it was Paul Mason that made this comment on like GB News or something. He was like, look, English radicalism has always been based around self-determination. And yeah, of course, England's been a sovereign nation for 1,000 years almost. So of course it's obsessed with it. But the second one was regain control over immigration on our own borders. And that, I think, is the thing that people are most disappointed with Mr. Johnson about. How could you do this to us? What were you thinking?
But we haven't got Brexit. That's the point. Yeah. You know, we're still being governed by the same liberal global mindset. You know, technically, I mean, what happened on the 31st of January 2020 was that we left the institutions of the European Union. We left the Parliament. I left the Parliament. the Brexit Party left the Parliament. I bet they were pleased with that. We left our position on the Commission. We left our position on the European Court of European Court of Justice, and so on. But we didn't give up the laws. The deal that Boris Johnson, he did 2 deals with the European Union. The first was the withdrawal agreement. And in the withdrawal agreement, he left Northern Ireland behind. It's something I've been fighting very hard. And the effect of leaving Northern Ireland behind is not just Northern Ireland being seriously compromised. It's that it also created a grappling hook, a regulatory grappling hook into the flesh of the rest of the United Kingdom, into Great Britain, basically. Yeah. And so we are being tugged through the Northern Ireland Protocol towards the EU. And Starmer is using it to justify getting closer to the EU on phytosanitary and sanitary conditions and so on. He will neuter our ability to chart an independent economic path using the protocol as his excuse. That's what he'll do. And that's partly why the protocol was designed the way it was designed. So even if you don't really care about Northern Ireland, I happen to care a lot about Northern Ireland, but even if you don't, even if you care really only about Great Britain, you still need to get rid of the Northern Ireland Protocol because it's a grappling hook into Great Britain. So we did that. And then the second deal that Boris Johnson did, the Trade and Cooperation Agreement, which came a year later, still requires this country to align with state aid laws in the European Union, such as they were on 31st December 2020, competition laws, employment laws, and environmental laws. And of course, under environmental laws, one of the passing shots of Theresa May was to embed net zero on our statute books. And the way the environmental alignment with the EU is framed in this new treaty is that we're not allowed to regress from any domestic environmental laws, even if those domestic laws have future effect. And of course, net zero is all about getting to net zero by 2050. And so it's a future effect. Are you with me? And
yeah, completely.
So even though...
I hate it. I'm getting angry and trying to contain my rage.
So under the Trade and Cooperation Agreement, we are not allowed to ditch net zero. People don't realise that it's not in the gift of our government any longer whether or not we get rid of this incredibly self-harming policy. It's signed into international treaty. And the other things he signed us up into, which I find horrifying, is a continued commitment to the European Convention of Human Rights. Now, the ECHR is independent of the European Union, but in the trade deal that we did with the EU, we committed to staying in it. So if we want to leave the ECHR, which is a reform UK policy, which is something Robert Jenrick also said he wanted to do, we would have to terminate the Trade and Cooperation Agreement.
See, I didn't know this.
Yeah, so this
very
is
interesting.
This is very interesting. Yeah. So you all roads take you back to getting Brexit done properly. You want to protect our borders, you've got to get Brexit done properly. You've got to ditch the Trade and Cooperation Agreement before you can really get out of the European Convention of Human Rights.
So, I mean, what this is doing for me is putting the scope of the Conservative betrayal into perspective. Because a lot of people, I think, have been fooled by Boris Johnson. I think a lot of people thought, he's going to get Brexit done, It's oven ready. And essentially what we've done is sold out 1.6 million British citizens in Northern Ireland, left them to rot with, just the most uncompetitive position we could put them in, and said, right, that's your problem. You're on your own. Enjoy being immiserated by the Republic of Ireland through these unfair, not even unfair, but just through us holding you back competitively.
Yeah.
And then for the rest of the UK, it's like, right, okay, you're not going to get the thing you voted for because of the agreement that we signed, which we could have been much more aggressive upon.
We should have been much more aggressive about it.
It's crazy.
I'll let you into a little, it's not really a confidence anymore, but I'm going to let you into this. One of the arch negotiators of the Trade and Cooperation Agreement didn't know that he'd bound us into a non-regression obligation on net zero. He didn't know it. And I was challenged by a peer in the House of Lords, as opposed to a pisshead, but a peer, if you get that was a joke, on whether or not I was right. Because one of the architects of the Trade and Cooperation Agreement had contradicted me. So I took a photograph of the provisions in the TCA, sent it across to this peer, And I got a text back a few days later going, oh, yeah, oh, yes, no, yeah, we are committed to non-regression. So even one of the architects of the agreement didn't know what the agreement said. And
oh God, what do we do?
And I'll just quickly rattle through what else is in the agreement very quickly. So through that agreement, we're also committed to funding European Union military development, the European Defence Fund. So that is for the creation and implementation of European hardware and software, military hardware and software on an interoperable basis. We, the United Kingdom, are funding the creation of a European Defence Union. And Starmer, I'm sure, wants to take us into that EDU.
No doubt.
And it's not like NATO, where it's lots of different independent sovereign states coming together and cooperating. The European Defence Union will be under Brussels. We will be giving up our independent defence capability. Now, that Boris Johnson didn't sign us up into that precisely, but he signed us up on a path towards that. He also signed us up into the European arrest warrant. So a court in Romania, for example, could issue an arrest warrant for a British citizen, and there's very little a British court could do to protect that British citizen. Now, you just think about that for a moment. How in any shape or form is that Brexit?
I mean, I'm trying to be charitable. I'm trying to think of a way to be charitable about this, but I didn't follow Brexit very closely after the referendum and after the Boris government, because the general attitude from the mainstream was, okay, well, we've kind of lost on that, and so we'll capitulate. Yeah. And so I assume, well, it can't be too bad. And I've got other things that I need to look into. I've got other things I'm more interested in studying. And now I'm glad I didn't, because I would have been raging about this every day of my life. Like, this is obviously, essentially, a way to tacitly and slowly, by degrees, scupper the entire project.
Absolutely. And we say, quite rightly, that the United Kingdom doesn't really have a written constitution.
Sure.
Well, I would say two of the most important constitutional documents in the UK now are international treaties over which we, the British people, have no control. The two treaties Boris Johnson signed, because they constitutionally determine our constitutional framework in so many areas. Yeah. And we can't ditch net zero. We can't get rid of, do with state aid that which we wish to. We can't buy British first. Did you know that? We can't, our government can't buy British first. In areas of strategic military importance, there is a carve out. But if our government wants to go to tender on something that isn't of strategic importance, we're obliged to tender with European Union member state firms on an equal basis. That ain't Brexit. It was all about buying British first.
Yeah.
And so I'll just say this one last thing on Brexit.
Sure.
If we got Brexit, if we genuinely became independent of the European Union, we would set the country on a path that you and I both wish to set it on. It's like, that game, is it called Django or something? Where you...
Jenga.
Jenga, not Django. Yeah. That's a film, isn't it? Yeah. Jenga, where you pull out a bit of... if we pulled out the trade and cooperation agreement and the withdrawal agreement, the whole thing would come crashing down and we'd become independent. We'd be forced to become independent overnight. And that's why Brexit was so critical. And it's so sad that we didn't get it.
And if we just had a government that actually wanted this, because I think the main issue is that none of our politicians really wanted this to happen. This was a massive upset. Even those ones who campaign on Brexit, like the Michael Goves, the Boris Johnsons, you can tell that this isn't really in their DNA. They're actually quite liberal internationalists themselves, and they would rather go on as they have done up until this point. And it would require a complete change of mindset from a new government that came in that was quite aggressive and bearish on this. It's like, no, we're here to fight, actually. We're here to fight for a future that is a possible future, but is not being realised because of the kind of torpor that has come across the country. But I think that would wake everything up. Suddenly the energy would be back. Suddenly Britain would be back. We would be if they always talk about being a world leader and competitive in this, that, and the other. It's like, but we're not in anything at all. Possibly poverty, I don't know, but things are really going downhill, and everyone can feel the degradation of the country when you're just walking around it. And it doesn't have to be this way.
Absolutely, and it's a tragedy that we haven't taken advantage of it, because we all should know. Well, I think we all know in our heart of hearts that regulations made in Brussels are not made for the benefit of the United Kingdom.
It doesn't even need to be said.
It doesn't even need to be said. So the fact that we're taking regulations from the European Union means we're just self-harming.
Yes, and we should be, in fact, inflicting the harm on them.
Yeah.
Via fair trade and competition. Right, okay, well, I guess we'll leave Brexit there because honestly it's infuriated me.
I hope you appreciated that segment from the podcast The Lotus Eaters, and if you want to see what else we're up to, you can always watch us have fun in Lads Hour, where we sort of are a bit laid back, have a bit of fun, and if you want to see all the other things that we're up to, you can always follow us on Twitter. Thank you very much for watching, and goodbye.